Robert Christian Hansen was born on February 15, 1939 in Esterville, Iowa, to Danish immigrants Christian and Edna Hansen. Interestingly, Esterville, for such a small town, was the birthplace for two multiple killers, Hansen and Benjamin B.J. Seyfried, who with his wife Erica killed a couple in Ocean City, Maryland in 2002. Christian Hansen was extremely strict with young Robert, forcing him to rise at 2 a.m. and work in the family's bakery. And logically, Robert would later fall asleep in school. Speaking of school, it was a miserable place for Bob, as he liked to be called. With him being skinny and awkward, there was no surprise he was bullied by boys and shunned by girls. His bad acne only made things worse. "I was one big pimple," he later said. He was naturally left-handed, but was forced by his father to use his right hand, which allegedly resulted in the development of his distinctive stutter. A loner, young Bob found a hobby that would later be instrumental in his murder spree, and it was hunting. He found that stalking and killing wild animals served as good substitute for his real desire, killing the girls who had taunted and rejected him. In 1957, at age 18, Hansen joined the U.S. Army Reserves in Pocahontas, Iowa. He reportedly did well in the military and received an honorable discharge in 1958. Following that, he worked as an assistant drill instructor at a police academy in Pocahontas. During this time, he met and married his first wife, Phoebe, daughter of the town's chiropractor, only to get divorced 6 months later. He still had a proverbial chip on his shoulder from the mistreatment he had received as youth, and in an act of revenge, convinced a 16-year-old member of the gang of young miscreants he led to aid him in burning down the school bus garage in the winter of 1960. Unfortunately for Hansen, his accomplice confessed, and Robert was sentenced to 3 years in the Anamosa State Penitentiary. His father was so embarrassed by his son's behavior that he packed up his wife and moved to Minnesota. Robert was released after only 20 months, but not before receiving a psychiatric assessment in prison. He was actually diagnosed with manic depression, now called bipolar disorder, and ordered to take lithium, the standard treatment for the disease at that time. Now, the thing is, this diagnosis would later be questioned, as psychiatrists later realized that Hansen had a habit of, let's say, lying about symptoms. Only 6 weeks after his release from prison, he married Darrell Hendrickson, who was a teacher, rather naive, and likely thought that she could fix her new husband. The couple moved to Anchorage, Alaska, to get a fresh start at life. However, Robert still could not stay out of trouble, accruing several arrests for petty theft. But the thing is, he didn't lack for money. Rather, he simply liked the thrill of stealing things and getting away with it. Hansen opened a bakery in 1967, and he and his wife had 2 children. He was liked in the community, and by all appearances was a hard-working, church-going husband and father. Aren't they all? However, underneath his mild exterior was a sadistic killer waiting to be born. In 1971, he was arrested twice, once for the abduction and attempted rape of a woman, and again for the rape of another, a sex worker. Although he was sentenced to 5 years, he was released to a halfway house in only 6 months. His next arrest, though, for stealing a chainsaw, would have more dire consequences, for he now had a serious criminal record. In 1976, he was charged with shoplifting a chainsaw and sentenced to 5 years, which unfortunately for the citizens of Alaska would be overturned on appeal. It was when Hansen was released from the prison that Alaska began to suspect that a serial killer was living in their midst. The badly decomposed body of Joanna Messina was found in a gravel pit near the city of Seward. A few weeks later, an unknown woman nicknamed Eklutna Annie was found near Eklutna Lake Road, and she has never been identified. 2 years later, the body of Sherry Morrow, a topless dancer, was found in a shallow grave beside the Nick River. During autopsy, investigators learned that she has been undressed, shot to death, then redressed, as there were no bullet holes in her clothes corresponding to her wounds. When bodies of young women started piling up and sex workers and topless dancers began going missing, the police started a task force. In a move that was at a time pretty much unprecedented, investigators asked the FBI to send an agent from their new behavioral support unit to form a psychological profile of the unknown offender. The FBI sent none other than John Douglas, one of the founders of the unit and the science of profiling. According to Agent Douglas, the unknown subject, or short UNSUB, was an expert hunter who probably kept trophies of his kills, both animal and human. Had low self-esteem, had a history of rejection by women, and likely stuttered. The agents didn't know at the time that Douglas has described Robert Hansen to a T. He bought a Piper Super Cub plane, although he didn't bother with a pilot's license. He was known as an expert hunter of big game, which was plentiful in Alaska. He killed wild sheep, wolves, and bears, whose heads or skins adorned his wall as trophies. He even broke some hunting records and had his name published in the Pope and Young Hunting Records book, although it would be removed following his conviction as a serial killer. In the summer of 1983, Hansen sent his wife and kids off to Europe and began work on what he called his summer project. He placed an ad in a local singles newspapers seeking women to, quote, "Join me in finding out what's around the next bend, over the next hill." As it turns out, the answer was death. On June 13, 1983, a truck driver found a barefoot, terrified girl running down 6th Avenue. He picked her up and she pleaded to be taken to her pimp at a Big Timber motel. The trucker informed police, who interviewed the girl at the motel, and found out that she was 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. Cindy said that she was working as a sex worker when she had been abducted by a client who had taken her to his home, where he'd placed her in his hidden basement. There, she was shackled and sexually violated, after which the man napped on a couch. She mentioned that the room was filled with hunting trophies like a bearskin rug on the floor and animal hats on the wall. After his nap, her captor took Cindy handcuffed to the airport, where he told her that they were going for a short plane ride to his cabin. But when he was distracted preparing the plane, Cindy took off and managed to run to safety. On the way to the police station, police drove her past the airport, where Cindy identified her abductor's plane. It didn't take the police long to trace the registration on the plane to, well, guess who? A 44-year-old Robert Hansen, a local baker. When questioned, he admitted to hiring Cindy for her services, but he denied that any violence had taken place. He said, "You can't rape a prostitute." Two of his friends, also pillars of the community, provided him with an alibi, and the police accepted this, for now. However, a few investigators believed Cindy and kept pursuing Hansen quietly. In October 1983, They got a warrant to search his residence, which made history as the first warrant in American criminal history granted on the basis of a criminal profile. Hansen fit everything about John Douglas's profile of the unsub, even down to his stutter. Following a 14-hour search of his residence, police hit the jackpot when they searched his attic. Hidden in the insulation was a variety of weapons, one of which, a .223 Ruger Mini 14 rifle, would be a ballistics match to the casings found with the bodies of the recovered victims. Under his headboard, they found the aerial map of the area, with 24 X's marked, some of which matched location in which bodies were found. In addition to the heads of animals he'd killed, this hunter also kept trophies from his human victims. Police found driver's licenses and jewelry in his basement, such as a fish necklace belonging to Andrea Altieri. Following his arrest, Hansen confessed to his involvement in several murders and rapes in a 12-hour taped confession. He said that his MO was to hire a sex worker and take her home to participate in violent fantasies. If they cooperated, he let them go, but if they didn't play along, he loaded them into his plane and flew them to his cabin, where he sent them naked in the woods, while he stalked them, eventually either shooting or stabbing them to death. In a chilling quote, he said, "It was like going after a trophy doll sheep or a grizzly bear." In February 1984, Robert Hansen pled guilty to 4 murders and was sentenced to 461 years plus life. He died in Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward in 2014. Some investigators believe he may have killed over 30 women, giving him another record: Alaska's most prolific serial killer.